Hello and welcome back to Verbose Mode by Tax here at Dev2Next in amazing Colorado Springs. And my next guest is Ted, as his shirt clearly states, so no one will forget. We have very informative shirts, right?
Yes.
I'm saying that today is Wednesday, which is today, and you're saying that you are Todd. How cool is that? Informational t-shirts to the win. Todd, thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
And your talks are about, in general, your thing is TDD, test-driven
That's one of my
development.
big things.
Yes. And I think this is an absolutely fascinating topic, especially in the age of AI.
Yes.
We're going to get to it in a second.
Exactly.
So tell me a little bit why TDD. It's kind of, I think we all know what it is. We also kind of know that it didn't really pick up.
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of, so I go way back with extreme programming practices, sort of pre-agile, manifesto. And I think test-driven development is often misunderstood. It's not really taught well, and there's a lot of subtleties and nuance. And so I do a lot of technical coaching and training around that. And one of the things, and we can talk later when we look at the board game, one of the first things you have to figure out is, what do you want the thing to do, right? So what should this new little behavior, right? Everything is changing behavior. Maybe it worked wrong and you want to fix it, or you want to add some functionality. And figuring out, what do you want it to do precisely enough? Well, if you're into AI and so on, that sounds like a prompt. Right, and the better you are, and the more precise you are about the prompts.
And even if it's not a prompt, it's some kind of software definition.
Exactly, and this is where we get requirements or user stories or whatever to define that first thing. And TDD guides you, right? It doesn't do anything for you, but it guides you on focusing. What does this next little thing need to do?
Okay, hear me out. I'm going to rant a little bit about that. So I think, for my layman opinion, about one of the reasons why TDD didn't really catch up and took the industry by the storm is that because people who write the software requirements are not technical to write the tests, right? So basically, as you said, tests express requirements.
Yes.
But people who own the requirements, product, business, they don't write tests.
Yeah, but I don't think that's why TDD hasn't caught on. I mean, TDD is like, in my mind, there's sort of behavior-driven development, which is there's the problem is a lot of terms in our industry, semantic diffusion, right? They usually meant something very specific, and then people, well, I don't quite like that, or maybe there's sort of the telephone or whisper game that kind of changes. But to me, TDD is in the scope of developers. It's just like, I don't have to ask permission for refactoring. I shouldn't. I don't need to file a ticket. I shouldn't. I mean, I know there are companies that do that. You want to do refactoring, file a ticket. Same thing with TDD, writing tests. We don't get asked permission to write code. We shouldn't be asking permission to write tests. And the way we write the TDD tests is, these are developer tests. These are for developers. They may be readable, hopefully in the domain with domain-driven design and ubiquitous language and all that kind of, they may be readable by product development and product management. But when they define the functionality, the behavior, it's up to us developers to translate that and then write tests of what we expect the system to do when that thing works.
That makes perfect sense, right? So then we're saying, okay, so yes, the requirements are owned by someone else, but we can translate it from English or whatever language the requirements are to tests.
Yes.
And this is what we should do first before we write any code.
That would be nice.
Now, the next step of my rant is, developers are biased for action.
Yes.
So when I read the requirements, what goes through my mind are no tests. What goes through my mind is, how do I solve this problem in code, probably the happy path, and ignore everything else, because obviously, of course. And I want to do it. Wow, that's a cool problem. I want to code it, and I run and I code it, and then like, okay, I need to write tests, and then I maybe write tests.
Hopefully, maybe.
Yeah, hopefully, but it's definitely not TDD. And I
Right.
think that the problem, this bias for action, is kind of, I don't get why would I now stop all my excitement of writing production and awesome code and instead doing something more boring of writing the tests first.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I find TDD fun because it breaks. So one of the things I observe when I do training, so I teach when I teach TDD, I don't teach TDD from at the start. I teach, let's figure out how to write code and refactor, and then we'll go on and see how to do TDD. What's really fascinating is when we sit down to write code, in our head, we have an idea of, okay, you know, let's say I'm figuring out the shipping costs for this box, and it's based on weight and destination. And so you're already figuring out, okay, where am I going to get this information from? What is it going to look like? And we already have in our head some amorphous plan of what we're going to do. And then we're writing code almost stream of conscious. And every time like an edge case pops into our head, oh, what happens if it's out of the US and we're shipping all to the US, what do I? And so we're writing all this stuff, and then we have the hard job, and this is why people tend not to like tests, is how do I test this now? And then they may write some tests and then find that the code isn't amenable to tests, and I see that a lot. Whereas with TDD, it's like, it's much smaller, tiny steps. But you get that little dopamine hit of, you write a test, and then you write the code, and now the test passes. And that should be minutes. And so throughout the day, you're like, win every few minutes of it. And then, oh, when something doesn't work, it's then much easier to figure out.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are clearly advantages of TDD for the process. And again, I might understand it, but I also understand that probably eating cake is not the best idea, but I still will. So in your example, when I'm thinking about like shipping and stuff, I think the dopamine key, like the kick that I will get is from just writing the code and running it the happy path, obviously, and see it running. I'm like, oh, this is cool. That works. And then test like, well, that's a chore. That's washing the dishes. I need to do it anyway. I'll do it and this kind of stuff.
And I think it's a chore because if you write the code first and now you have to figure out how to, in a sense, break it or make sure, like, that's hard. And especially, again, you often write tens, perhaps hundreds of lines of code before you write a test. And let's be honest, like, this is the way most people are taught. And I think that's the underlying problem. I was actually having dinner last night and was talking with someone, and they were actually taught to write tests first. And I'm like, wow, that is extremely rare. I think, and I've taught introduction to Java courses, and you can teach it TDD first. And it's because in a sense, that's what we do, right? When we write small applications, we write something in the console, it's like you run it, you see it, and it's like, oh, that's good, let me make a change, run it and see it. Well, that's what TDD is. And so, but I think it's, the other part of it is, since we're not taught that, and we go through this process of writing code and then hopefully writing some tests, then our code base is not amenable to TDD.
No, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I'm completely here with you about the benefits and the importance of TDD. What I'm trying to understand is, or claim, that there is a human nature aspect that prevents us from going to gym and prevents us from writing tests first.
And I think it's not like, so again, I don't see the analogy of writing tests and going to the gym. Because that's like, people want to, but they don't. And so you have to look at why not.
They know that it's important and they don't.
But to me, tests and test-driven development are not about the tests, they're about making the development process easier. Right? If I have good tests, I can be super confident, I don't have to be anxious at all, I don't have to worry, and I don't have to be stressed about, did I miss something? And so it's actually easier, in my experience, to code using TDD than to code non-TDD.
I get it. And
so, and so why people aren't doing it is because they haven't felt that, right? So it's very hard to do something that you, and see the benefits of something you haven't actually experienced. And then once you experience it, it's like, you know, you use the analogy of cake. It's like, to me, it's like it's a well-balanced meal, and I get everything I need from it, and I'm constantly making low anxiety progress.
I love it. I love it. No, those are obviously great arguments.
Yeah.
So, but I think we both agree that between the writing production code and writing tests, writing production code is what we I don't want to say like what we prefer or what we enjoy more or what we strive to.
I think it's just what people are used to.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's I think it's actually less enjoyable for me now, I've been doing TDD for a while, to write production code without tests. I get really nervous, I get frustrated, stuff doesn't work and I have to run through the debugger. I think that's frustrating. And I'd rather have my frustration in understanding what is the behavior that's desired rather than how do I implement it. And so I really think it's just a matter of people haven't experienced it and all they know is writing code first. And so naturally, and they get, and we get, of course, we get joy out of it, else why would we do it? But because they haven't experienced real TDD, it looks and sounds imposing and difficult and hard and like going
boring
to the gym. When it's actually not. When it's, if you're gonna, it's like getting a nice, Swedish massage. It's like, it makes you feel good and it, eliminates your pain.
I love it. And that's a very interesting point that brings us to AI. The reason why I asked about our feelings towards writing tests versus writing production code is this perceived conflict about what we want to do with AI and what we have to do with AI, right? Yeah. And what I'm saying is we can write, we can do what we like, and that's write code, and then ask AI to write tests. And this is iffy at best. Because by the nature of models training, and the unavoidable at the moment, at least, the strive of networks to appease, to get the positive reinforcement that they were taught through the learning process. Right. Those tests will necessarily not be critical enough of our code.
Exactly. It's like you're giving here's the answer. Write the question. It's going to write the question that fits, even if it's the wrong question.
Right. So. What would be more useful for our process is doing the other way around. Yeah. Is writing tests and letting the LLM to implement the code until the test pass.
Right.
So TDD in context of AI makes tons of sense. But then we're back to my original question. If I enjoy more writing code than writing tests,
right.
LLM makes my life very miserable.
Right.
It takes the part that I like the most from me and leaves me with this with this chore of
now your job is translating English requirements into concrete, implementable, runnable tests.
Right. So,
which I enjoy, but it's also, you're absolutely right. Like, to me, I don't use LLMs a lot. And I have experimented with writing tests first, doing a TDD and doing that. And you're right, like, I like writing the code, I like refactoring the code, I like understanding the domain, I like then coming up with new abstractions and the stuff that stands out in my memory throughout my career are places where it's like, I got a huge aha moment of understanding the domain. Whether it was a jail management system or insurance, like getting that understanding from me and knowing how that works and getting that aha, and that only comes about by putting, I was thinking about like putting your fingers in the clay, putting your fingers in the code and moving it around and changing it and then really understanding that. And if we let the AI do that, then that's not a job I want.
So what do we do with that? I mean, in the end of the day, TDD is the right constraint.
I think so. If you could, and so what I think, so what I sometimes will do is I'll have it generate some code, but then I'll refactor, or I'll basically, okay, the tests get to pass, and I'll delete it and write it from scratch. Like, I know that it's possible and I know what it did, but usually it's such small pieces that I'll end up, just refactoring it. But I still want I much more use it just as an assistant, not for just generating code.
Okay, all right. So then that's a good point. So we can say, okay, we won't give up our coding.
Yeah.
But it brings us back to the task. I don't want to say chore because you obviously don't see it that way. To the task of writing the tests up front. And assuming I'm not as in love with writing tests, is there a way that I can still generate the tests?
I mean, you could take your English requirement and say write a test first for this, even though the code doesn't exist.
The problem with
then it's like, if it gets it, how do
how do you validate?
To me, it just doesn't seem that useful, because it's not the typing of the code that's the problem, that's the bottleneck. It's the understanding of what does this English word and sentence and paragraph mean for what I'm about to do and how it fits in with the rest of the code. And so I need to have that, like, to me, I'll use it again like as an assistant, so sort of as a bicycle for the mind. But I don't want it to go off and do stuff. So I want it to help me. I don't want it to do it for me. And so I can say, I could do things like, hey, maybe there's an API that I don't know, write me a sample thing, and now I can incorporate that and write my test. But I don't know. I have difficulty seeing some of the benefit, especially of having it write the tests for me, because I have to understand it. If I'm writing production code, I have to understand it. My team has to understand it. And so it's not just in my head, it has to be in everybody's head, which is why I like Ensemble or mob programming for development.
Yes.
So
maybe specs and behavior-driven development is the bridge between the English language of software definition requirements and the tests that can be generated algorithmically and deterministically from those specs. The specs are human readable, and we can assess if the generated specs really capture the intent.
And that's the key. So one of the things that LLMs don't do is question you. Right?
Yes.
You tell them something and they say,
You're absolutely
you're
right.
absolutely right.
You're absolutely
this
right.
must be what you want. Whereas if we get a spec, if we get something from our product management, we say, what do you mean by this? Or we just did this other thing here, that makes no sense. So this pushback, because requirements, and this has been the problem throughout our industry, is like, it's not, here are the requirements, go do it, right? Waterfall, it doesn't work. It's all about feedback cycles and negotiations and conversations, right? A story being a token for a conversation. You're supposed to not just have a big document, but you're supposed to talk to the person who understands it. And LLMs don't do that.
But we can do it. So we have requirements that are expressed by product business people in dubious English. That's the entire idea, right? The language is not perfect, the knowledge is not perfect, people are not perfect, communication is hard, you name it.
Right.
We have a document that can be read in 20 different ways. An LLM will express what it understood from it without questioning as a spec.
Right.
Now, we can still read the spec. It is still human readable. The stakeholders who wrote the original requirements can still read the spec. It's a little bit weird format, but it's still readable English. And then we can debate. Hey, this is what the machine saw from your requirements. If you think that this is complete nonsense, maybe the document that you wrote is not so great. And we have this conversation up to the point that whoever held the requirements in their head actually see the representation of this requirement in the spec. Now, the beautiful part about the spec is that it is algorithmically, deterministically machine parsable. And we can use the spec either to just run BDD tests on it, or to generate deterministically tests out of it. And if we want to generate tests out of it, this will give us, the developers, another point for review, because we can retest.
Sure. Right.
And then we can decide, do we want to let the machine run until it implements it and suck all the fun from our lives, or we have a perfect setup for TDD, starting implementing it, getting the green light, hitting the dopamine, and writing the code that we like.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's part of it that sort of is problematic for me is I don't like long PRD documents. I don't like I know there's certain areas of software where look you need to document the stuff. It's critical systems, but a lot of systems are not like that. And I've worked at companies where it was a 200-page document, but the document by itself does not contain all the, like we said, it's incomplete because it requires outside knowledge, and it also requires, right, it's a communication medium, but it's not, you still have to go and question it. And so I'm not sure that, I mean, you could do things like, hey, are there any internal conflicts in this document where one thing says one thing and another part says another? That's useful. But I don't know that and maybe translating some of the scenarios that you often find in the document into acceptance test level things, more end-to-end, that would be useful.
Yes,
But
and that's definitely part of it, of course.
And I think that's great because that's like, and then we can read that over and say, is that represent what we think we want? And then that feedback would be useful to the stakeholders to say, oh, that's not quite what I want, right? So there's that feedback loop, and that's useful.
Exactly.
But I think once you get down to writing the actual implementation, I need to write the test because I need to, when you get down into starting to write things, you then notice discrepancies and things that don't fit. It's like, well, the overall, like I understand the overall thing, but it doesn't fit with this other thing that we did, but I can adjust it or I can ask a question.
Yeah. No, okay. All right, so you convinced me. All my ideas of magically not writing tests are down the drain. Which bring me to a question, okay, can you make writing tests more fun for me, which brings us to the board game?
Yes. So I have this board game that I developed, and the idea is there's some fundamental principles in the way I do TDD, and the way I teach it, and the way I coach it, and I originally wanted to just create a little thing to memorize some of the steps, and built on it over time. And what's really nice about it is it's a way to learn it, and also it's popular with a lot of technical coaches like myself who use it as a way to foster conversation where we're not stuck in the code, where we might be like, no, that's my code, I don't want to do this thing, and really explore what does it feel like, and sort of talk about what the different aspects of the test-driven development process are. So the game is fun, even for non-coders. I've had non-coders play it, and as a game, it's fun by itself. But using it, and you can have more adversarial kind of game or a more cooperative kind of game to sort of simulate ensemble programming. Every time I watch people play it, I get new ideas for variations, and it's really a lot of fun.
This is great. So what's it's about? What the gameplay?
So it's basically your goal is to get as many commits as you can, and the way you get commits is the first thing you do is figure out what should it do, and so you play cards to move around this hexagonal based board, and there's a very strong prediction aspect to it. So the way I do TDD, some people call it call your shot, and so basically when you write a test, it's supposed to fail, but not just fail, it has to fail in a very specific way. Right? If we say, well, we haven't supported adding shipping costs yet, well, when I call this thing to find out the shipping cost, it should return 0 because it's not there yet. If it returns 10, something's weird. There's something missing I don't understand. Or if it blows up with an exception, oh, maybe there's something else wrong. And so this idea of before you hit the run to see the test fail, you predict not only that it fails, but it fails in a very specific, predictable way. And so the game reinforces that, like you have. So you play what's called a write code card to get to the next step. And if you play a less code card, because the less code you write at each step, the more likely it is that your predictions are going to come true.
I love
and so
it.
you go around the board and you go around the board, and you can take on risk. You can say, I'm going to skip tests and see what happens. And there's a tracker for how much risk you have in your code. And when you get to the point of commit, it's kind of simulating this idea of the continuous integration. Okay, I tried to commit. Oh, it fails a continuous integration test.
Because your risk was too high.
Yeah, because your
Nice.
risk is high, you have to roll a die, and then you go back and you have to revert and start over.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. I love it. I love it. But is there like, is it for sale or is it
Yes,
website?
it's for sale. If you go to tdd.cards,
Okay.
you can buy a copy.
Nice, nice.
And one of the things I do is I do a lot of live coding on Twitch, and I'm doing all the development of the online version of the game on the stream. And so that's, I'll be picking that up in a couple weeks.
Brilliant, brilliant. Love it. That was fascinating. Thank you very much. I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience learned a lot as well. And TDD.cards. This is where you get the board game. And if you like board games, regardless of how you feel about TDD, just go ahead and buy it. And maybe you will love TDD. And next thing you know, you love TDD. Excellent. And for you folks, stay tuned for more episode of the Verbose Mode by Tax here at Dev2Next right after a short break. I hope our next guest is just around the corner. Thank you.
All right, thanks.